The alien fleet did not fire a single shot. That was the first thing Warlord Kareth noticed as his armada dropped out of hyperspace above Haven 9. No resistance. No desperate broadcasts. No panicked evacuation signals flooding the comm channels. Just silence, perfect, unnatural silence, spreading across a human world that was supposed to be screaming. It should have been burning. Kareth had studied human behavior. He knew their patterns. When threatened, they fought. When outmatched, they ran. When doomed, they begged. Haven 9 did none of those things. The orbital defense platforms hung motionless in space like abandoned relics, their weapon arrays powered down as if the planet itself had simply given up. "Scan for life signs," Kareth ordered, his voice calm but edged with something he did not name. The results came back too quickly. No significant biosignatures detected, Warlord. For a moment, no one on the command deck spoke. Haven 9 had housed over 60,000 humans. Families. Workers. Children. A growing colony at the edge of contested space. It could not simply be empty. Kareth stepped forward, narrowing all four of his eyes at the display. The cities were intact. Towers stood unbroken. Transport lines lay undisturbed. There were no signs of bombardment, no debris fields, no evidence of evacuation fleets. The world was untouched. And yet, it was dead. "Impossible," one of his officers muttered. Kareth did not correct him. Because for the first time in decades of conquest, he agreed. "Deploy ground teams," he said instead. "I want answers." Dropships descended through a sky that should have been filled with resistance fire. Instead, they passed through quiet clouds and landed in the center of Haven 9's primary city without interference. The first squads moved cautiously through empty streets where human life had clearly existed only hours before. Food still sat on tables. Doors were open. A child's toy rolled slowly across the pavement, nudged by a wind that carried no voices with it. "They left in a hurry," the ground commander reported. "But there's no indication of where they went." Kareth watched the live feed in silence. His instincts, sharpened over centuries of war, whispered something deeply wrong beneath the surface of this victory. Humans did not abandon entire worlds without a trace. Not without reason. Not without leaving something behind. "Check subterranean levels," he ordered. "Every tunnel, every facility. I want." The transmission cut out. Static flooded the channel for half a second before the image returned, distorted and flickering. The squad's helmets were still visible, but their movements had slowed, as if something unseen pressed down on them. "Commander!" Karetha's tone sharpened. No response. Then one of the soldiers turned toward the camera, and for a brief moment, Kareth saw something impossible reflected in the visor. Not fear. Recognition. The feed died. Every screen across the bridge went black at the same time. Then, without warning, a single signal forced its way through every system on the fleet. It bypassed encryption, ignored command locks, and replaced every display with a single human symbol pulsing in deep crimson. Kareth felt it then, not fear, not yet, but something colder. Understanding was coming. A voice followed. Human. Unshaken. "You're right on time." The bridge froze as the message continued, carrying no distortion, no urgency, only certainty. "This colony was never meant to survive you." Karetha's claws tightened against the command console. "What have you done?" he demanded, though he already sensed the answer would not be simple. The voice did not respond immediately. It let the silence stretch, deliberate, calculated, forcing every mind on that bridge to lean forward, to wait. Then it spoke again. "You didn't destroy Haven 9, the human voice said quietly. "You activated it." Across the fleet, sensors began to spike. Deep beneath the planet's surface, something enormous shifted. The first tremor did not come from the surface. It rose from somewhere deeper, far below the abandoned cities, beneath layers of rock that no standard scan should have penetrated, and yet every ship in Karetha's fleet felt it at the same time. Instruments flickered. Gravity readings shifted by fractions too small to explain, yet too precise to ignore. The planet was not breaking. It was waking up. "Full spectrum analysis," Kareth ordered, his voice now stripped of patience. "I want to know what is moving beneath that world." His officers moved instantly, flooding the command grid with scans that dove deeper than protocol allowed. Seismic mapping, subspace resonance sweeps, quantum density probes designed for collapsing stars. Data poured in, fast, chaotic, and increasingly contradictory. "There's structure down there," one analyst said, confusion bleeding into his tone. "Not natural. Not geological." Kareth stepped closer to the display as the planetary cross-section rendered itself layer by layer. The upper crust was exactly as expected: human construction zones, transport tunnels, energy grids. But beneath that, the image stuttered, then resolved. A lattice. Not scattered installations. Not hidden bunkers. A complete, planet-spanning architecture embedded deep within the mantle, stretching across continents in geometric precision. It was too vast to be built in secret, too advanced to be ignored. And yet, it had never appeared in any reconnaissance. "How long has that been there?" Kareth asked. No one answered immediately, because no one had an answer that made sense. "It's integrated into the planet itself," another officer said slowly. "Like it was grown there, or constructed before the colony even existed." A silence settled across the bridge, heavier than before. Because that meant only one thing. Haven 9 had never been just a colony. "Warlord," a communications specialist interrupted, his voice tight. "We are detecting a transmission origin point." "Location?" The officer hesitated. "Everywhere." Before Kareth could respond, the signal surged again. The same human voice returned, no longer confined to their screens but resonating through internal systems, as if it had found pathways no alien technology should have allowed. "You're looking for the wrong answer," it said. Kareth did not interrupt this time. He listened. "You're scanning for weapons, defenses, survivors. You think this is about a battlefield." The voice paused, letting the assumption hang, then broke it. "It isn't." Below, the lattice shifted again. This time, the change was visible from orbit. Lines of faint light began to pulse across the planet's surface, tracing patterns beneath the soil, illuminating buried structures that had remained dormant until now. Entire regions of Haven 9 lit up in synchronized motion, like veins igniting under skin. Kareth felt something unfamiliar press against his thoughts. Not fear. Not yet. But the first edge of it. "What is your objective?" he demanded, forcing control back into his voice. "If this is a weapon, you will deactivate it immediately. You are outmatched." The human voice responded with something that almost sounded like amusement. "You still think this is about matching you?" The pause. Then softer. "That's the mistake every species makes." New data flooded the displays. Energy signatures were rising, not from a single source, but across the entire planetary network. Each node in the lattice was activating in sequence, building toward something larger, something coordinated. Karetha's tactical mind began assembling possibilities. Planetary shield grid. Subterranean weapons array. Emergency evacuation system. None of them fit. "Warlord," an analyst said, voice strained, "we're detecting outgoing transmissions." "Jamming protocols," Kareth snapped. "They're not using standard channels," the officer replied. "It's not electromagnetic. It's not subspace. It's..." He stopped. Because the answer, when it appeared, made even less sense than the question. "It's encoded in gravitational fluctuation patterns." Kareth stared at him. "That is impossible." "It is happening." For the first time, Kareth realized he was not dealing with a hidden defense. He was dealing with something designed to be seen only after it was too late. "Where is it going?" he asked. The response came in a whisper. "Everywhere." The human voice returned one final time, quieter now, but far more dangerous. This was never about Haven 9 surviving. The planet pulsed again, brighter, faster. It was about making sure you didn't. The transmission did not travel like anything the alien fleet understood. It did not radiate outward in waves. It did not compress into bursts or slip through subspace corridors. It moved differently, sliding along invisible contours of gravity itself, threading through space like something that had always been there, waiting for a signal to ride upon it. Kareth watched as long-range sensors tried, and failed, to track it. "It's not weakening," one of his officers said, disbelief creeping into his voice. "Distance isn't degrading the signal." "Because it isn't traveling through distance," another replied quietly. That was when Kareth understood the first part of the trap. This was not a distress call. This was a broadcast that could not be stopped. "Trace the endpoints," Kareth ordered, his tone sharp again, forcing the bridge back into motion. "Where is it being received?" The answer came back in fragments. Multiple regions, across known space. Outer trade corridors, neutral zones. Unregistered sectors. Earth. The word landed heavier than anything else. Karetha's gaze hardened. Of course it was Earth. The origin of the infestation. The center of human expansion. The species that refused containment, that spread faster than projections, that adapted faster than doctrine allowed. He had expected retaliation. He had not expected silence. "Prepare for counter-response," Kareth said. "If Earth mobilizes, I want full interception grids active before their fleets." "Warlord," the tactical officer interrupted, voice tightening, "there is no fleet movement." Kareth turned slowly. "Clarify." "All monitored human colonies have gone dark," the officer continued. "No outgoing signals. No mobilization patterns. No military activity." "That is not possible." "It is confirmed." Kareth stepped toward the central display as new data flooded in, each report reinforcing the same impossible reality. 12 human colonies, scattered across multiple systems, each one active just hours ago, had simultaneously fallen silent. No distress calls. No evacuation traffic. No defensive posturing. Just absence. "They're hiding," one officer suggested quickly. "Preparing a coordinated strike." "No," Kareth said, because hiding implied fear. And this did not feel like fear. "Then what are they doing?" the officer asked. No one answered. Because the answer was beginning to take shape, and none of them wanted to say it aloud. The human voice returned, not through the planetary systems this time, but through the fleet's long-range communication arrays, riding the same impossible signal that had already spread beyond Haven 9. "You're waiting for us to react," it said calmly. Karetha's jaw tightened. "Correct," he replied, deciding, deliberately, not to show uncertainty. "You initiated contact. Now you will explain your actions." A pause followed, long enough to feel intentional. "No." The single word landed harder than any threat. Kareth felt the shift ripple through his command crew. Not panic. Not yet. But something closer to disorientation. This was not how inferior species behaved. This was not how conquered civilizations responded. "You misunderstand your position," Kareth said, voice low, controlled. "You have revealed a planetary system of unknown function. You have broadcast its existence across the galaxy. Whatever you intended, you have made yourself a target." "Good," the voice replied. No hesitation. No calculation. Just certainty. That was the point. The bridge fell silent again. Because that answer broke something fundamental. Targets were not supposed to invite attention. Targets were supposed to avoid it. "What are you trying to achieve?" Kareth demanded, this time unable to keep the edge from his voice. For a moment, there was nothing. Then the human voice returned, softer than before, but carrying something far more dangerous than confidence. "Correction," it said. "The beat. You're asking the wrong question." Karetha's claws pressed into the console. "Then tell me the right one." Another pause. Longer this time. Deliberate. "What happens," the voice said quietly, "when every species in the galaxy sees what you did here and realizes we let it happen?" Kareth froze. Not because he didn't understand the words, but because he did. Around him, the data streams shifted again. External networks, alien, neutral, allied, were already reacting to the transmission. Fragments of the Haven 9 event were spreading. The empty cities. The activated lattice. The impossible signal. No. The implication. "You're exposing us," one officer whispered. No, Kareth said slowly. Because exposure implied weakness. This was something else. They're baiting us. The human voice responded instantly. Close, it said. Then, with a calm that carried absolute conviction. We're redefining you. Before Kareth could respond, a new alert cut through the bridge. Warlord, we're detecting anomalies across multiple systems. Report. Energy spikes, identical to Haven 9's signature pattern. Karetha's eyes widened slightly. Locations? The answer came back in a cascade of coordinates. Dozens. Then hundreds. It's spreading. The first external feed arrived from a neutral observation outpost 2 sectors away. No one on Karetha's bridge spoke as the transmission forced itself onto their display, overriding standard protocols with the same quiet authority as the Haven 9 signal. The image stabilized slowly, revealing a distant human colony, smaller than Haven 9, less developed, but unmistakably alive only moments ago. Then the ground beneath that world began to glow. Lines of light spread across its surface in precise, geometric patterns, mirroring the lattice now fully active beneath Haven 9. Entire continents pulsed in synchronized rhythm, as if something buried deep within the planet had just been awakened. They're all doing it, one officer whispered. Kareth did not respond. He was watching the timing. Each activation was not simultaneous. It was staggered, deliberate, a sequence unfolding across systems in calculated intervals, ensuring maximum visibility, maximum confusion, maximum reach. They want this seen, Kareth said quietly. The realization settled like a blade sliding into place. This was not containment. This was theater. Warlord, the intelligence officer said, voice strained. Incoming reports from allied systems, they are already responding. Another feed replaced the first. An alien trade world. Densely populated. Strategically insignificant, until now. Its orbital networks were alive with activity, ships scrambling, sensors recalibrating, governments reacting to the sudden emergence of these identical planetary signatures across human space. They're panicking, the officer added. Kareth watched the chaos unfold, but his focus remained elsewhere. On the pattern. On the intent behind it. Continue playback, he ordered. The feed shifted again. A third world. Then a fourth. Each one lighting up in the same precise manner. Each one revealing a hidden network beneath its surface that no external scan had ever detected. Each one broadcasting, not a distress call, but a signal designed to be intercepted. And understood. They're showing the galaxy something, Kareth said. No one disagreed. Because it was obvious now. This was not a response to the attack. This had been prepared long before it. Warlord, the science officer interrupted, urgency creeping into his tone. We've completed deeper analysis of Haven 9's subterranean structure. Kareth turned slightly. Report. It's not just infrastructure, the officer said. It's recording everything. Every weapon discharge. Every energy fluctuation. Every command frequency we used during the assault. A silence followed. Because the implication was immediate. And? Kareth. The officer hesitated. It has already transmitted that data. Karetha's gaze sharpened. To whom? The answer came back without hesitation this time. To everyone. The bridge did not react outwardly, but the shift was undeniable. Because this was no longer a battlefield. This was exposure on a scale none of them had anticipated. They're not just showing the destruction, another officer said slowly. They're showing how we did it. Kareth felt the structure of the situation rearrange itself in his mind. Every weapon signature. Every tactical pattern. Every moment of calculated precision during the extermination of Haven 9. Focus. Not just as evidence, but as proof. They're rewriting the narrative, Kareth said. The human voice returned immediately, as if waiting for that exact realization. No, it corrected. A brief pause. We're revealing it. Karetha's claws tightened again. You think this changes anything? He demanded. You think the galaxy will turn against us because of one colony? Another pause. Longer this time. Not because of one colony. The tone shifted. Slightly. Enough to matter. But because of what that colony was. Before Kareth could press further, the science officer spoke again, faster now, urgency overtaking composure. Warlord, we've isolated the core system beneath Haven 9. Kareth turned. Display it. The planetary cross-section reformed, zooming deeper into the lattice until it reached a central node, far larger than the rest, buried at the planet's core. It pulsed with controlled energy, not chaotic like a weapon, but stable. Intentional. What is it? Kareth asked. The officer swallowed. It's not a weapon system. Then what? The beat. It's a data core. The words landed heavier than expected, because they made no sense. A data core does not require planetary-scale architecture, Kareth said coldly. No, the officer agreed. Then his voice dropped. But this one does. The display shifted again, revealing layers of information embedded within the core, vast, structured, impossibly dense. Not just recordings of the attack, but something far larger. Historical logs, expansion data, predictive models, contact records. They've been collecting everything, the officer said. Not just from Haven 9. From every interaction, every species, every conflict. Karetha's mind moved quickly now, assembling the final piece. This colony, he said slowly, was never meant to survive. No, the officer replied. It was meant to be attacked. The human voice returned one final time, confirming it without hesitation. Correct. The lights across Haven 9 surged brighter. Across distant systems, more human colonies activated in sequence, each one broadcasting the same expanding archive. Each one adding to it. Each one ensuring it could not be erased. Kareth stared at the display as the scale of it finally became clear. This was not revenge. Not yet. This was preparation. You let us destroy it, he said, the words tasting unfamiliar even as he spoke them. A pause followed. Yes. The single word carried no regret. No anger. Only certainty. Kareth felt something shift beneath that certainty. Something far more dangerous than a hidden weapon. Why? He demanded. This time, the answer came immediately. Because now, the voice said quietly, we know exactly who you are. A new alert cut through the bridge. Warlord, long-range sensors are detecting unknown signatures. Karetha's gaze snapped toward the display. Clarify. The officer's voice faltered. They're not coming from Haven 9. The beat. They're coming from outside mapped space. The first unknown signature did not appear as a ship. It appeared as an absence. Kareth watched the outer sensor grid struggle to resolve it. An empty distortion where space should have been consistent. No energy output. No mass reading. No propulsion trace. Just a region of space that refused to behave like space. Then it moved. Not with acceleration. Not with momentum. It simply changed position. Track it, Kareth ordered. We can't, the sensor officer replied instantly. There's nothing to track. It isn't emitting. The distortion shifted again. Closer. A second one appeared. Then a third. Each one emerging at the edge of detection, not entering the system through hyperspace lanes or jump vectors, but manifesting as if they had always been there, hidden just beyond perception. Kareth felt the bridge tighten around him. This is not possible, one officer said. Kareth did not correct him, because he was beginning to understand the second part of the trap. Magnify, he said. The display adjusted, forcing visual interpretation onto something that resisted it. The distortions sharpened, barely, into shapes that resembled ships only in the most abstract sense. Smooth. Not reflecting light so much as bending it around themselves. And silent. Completely silent. How many? Kareth asked. The answer came slower this time. We don't know. Because each time the system attempted a count, the number changed. 8, 12. More are appearing. Kareth exhaled slowly. Prepare engagement formations. Warlord, the tactical officer said carefully, we don't have target locks. Then prepare anyway. Because uncertainty was no longer an excuse. It was the battlefield. The human voice returned. Not through the colony. Not through the broadcast. But through the same channel the unknown signatures seemed to occupy, clear, stable, as if it existed in the same layer of reality. You're looking in the wrong direction again. Karetha's eyes narrowed. Explain. The pause. You think those are reinforcements. Another distortion flickered into existence, this one closer than the rest. Close enough now that the fleet's visual systems could no longer pretend it was empty space. The outline resolved further, revealing a structure that defied conventional design. No visible engines, no weapon arrays, no command tower. Just presence. They're not, the voice continued. They're us. The words landed harder than anything before them. Kareth felt the shift ripple through his crew, not fear, not yet, but the collapse of assumption. You expect me to believe, Kareth said slowly, that these constructs are human vessels? Not vessels, the voice corrected. Evolution. The nearest distortion moved again. This time, it did not simply reposition. It unfolded. Space around it seemed to bend inward, revealing layers that had been hidden within its structure, vast internal geometry folding outward in impossible angles, like something too large for normal space compressing itself into visibility. Karetha's mind rejected it. Then recalibrated. Energy readings are still 0, the sensor officer said, his voice now barely controlled. No emissions. No thermal signature. It's like they don't exist until we observe them. They exist, Kareth said, because now he understood. They're just not bound by our detection. The human voice responded instantly. Now you're getting closer. More distortions appeared across the system, each one resolving slightly faster than the last. The pattern was accelerating. Learning. Adapting. No shipyard activity, another officer reported. No construction logs. No prior sightings. Of course not, Kareth said quietly. Because the timeline was wrong. These ships had not been built after Haven. They had existed before it. Hidden. Waiting. How long? Karth asked not to his crew, but to the voice itself. How long have you had this? For the first time, the voice hesitated. Just for a fraction. Long enough. The answer was incomplete. Intentionally. Karth felt it. Another open loop, another piece withheld. You let us believe you were weak, he said. Yes. You let us think your colonies were unprotected. Yes. You allowed the destruction of Haven 9. The pause. Longer this time. Yes. The admission did not come with pride. Or anger. It came with something far more dangerous. Acceptance. Karetha's claws pressed deeper into the console. Why? The nearest human construct shifted again, its surface rippling as if responding to the question itself. The answer came not from the voice, but from the data. New transmissions flooded the system, not from Haven 9, but from the hidden fleet now surrounding it. Streams of information, alien tactical patterns, weapon signatures, command hierarchies, all perfectly organized, perfectly understood. Mirrored. Refined. Weaponized. They weren't building ships, Kareth said slowly. They were learning us. The human voice returned, confirming it. We were becoming you. A silence followed. Better. Kareth looked out across the growing number of human constructs, each one now fully visible, each one positioned with deliberate precision around his fleet. They were not random. They were not defensive. They were arranged. Like a net. You've been preparing for war, Kareth said. Another pause. Then the final twist of the phase landed. No, the voice replied. So certain. We've been preparing for you. The sensor grid erupted again. Warlord, more signatures. Kareth did not look away. How many? The officer's voice broke. All of them. The trap did not close. That was the first thing Kareth realized. The human constructs, if they could even be called that, did not surge forward, did not unleash weapons, did not behave like any fleet he had ever encountered. They held position. Perfectly still. Perfectly silent. Surrounding his armada not as attackers, but as something far more unsettling. Observers. Why aren't they firing? One of his officers demanded, unable to contain the tension anymore. Kareth did not answer, because he understood now that this was not hesitation. This was control. They don't need to, he said quietly, and that realization carried more weight than any incoming barrage. Warlord, the communications officer said, voice tight, we are receiving external transmissions, not from them. From where? Everywhere. The bridge filled with overlapping signals, alien languages, fragmented broadcasts, emergency alerts from systems across the region. Feeds from neutral worlds, trade hubs, minor empires, even allied territories began flooding into the command network, each one reacting to the same unfolding reality. The Haven 9 data had spread, and now it was being understood. They're seeing everything, the officer said. The weapons to our commands. Karetha's gaze remained fixed on the silent human fleet. Of course they are. Because that had always been the objective. Not just to reveal what had happened, but to let the galaxy interpret it. A new transmission forced itself to the forefront, an alien council world. Its representatives gathered in visible panic as they processed the data streams now flooding their systems. We were not informed of this level of force, one voice was saying. This was not a containment action, another added. This was extermination. Kareth felt the shift immediately. Not on his bridge, but beyond it. They're turning, one officer whispered. No, Kareth said, because turning implied betrayal. They're recalculating. And in that recalculation, something far more dangerous was forming. The human voice returned. Unchanged. You built your power on fear, it said, on the idea that no one would ever challenge you. Kareth did not respond. You made examples of species that resisted you. You controlled expansion. You dictated limits. The pause. You thought we would be just another example. Karetha's claws flexed slowly. You are, he said. The nearest human construct shifted slightly, not forward, not aggressive, but enough to break the perfect stillness that had defined them. No, the voice replied. And this time, there was no softness left in it. We're the exception. Before Kareth could counter, a new alert cut through the bridge. Warlord, multiple allied systems are requesting clarification on engagement protocols. Another followed. Several trade coalitions are suspending cooperation. And another. Military assets in outer regions are repositioning away from our borders. Kareth felt it now. The pressure was no longer coming from the human fleet. It was coming from everything else. They're isolating us, an officer said, voice barely steady. Yes, Kareth replied. Because that was the next layer. The humans had not attacked. They had revealed. And now the galaxy was reacting. They're collapsing your influence, the human voice said, confirming it. Not with force. The pause. With consequence. Karetha's mind moved rapidly, recalculating the strategic landscape. Alliances built over centuries. Trade routes. Political leverage. All of it depended on perception, on the belief that his empire was dominant, controlled, justified. Now that perception was cracking. Not from rebellion, but from doubt. You think this weakens us, Kareth said, forcing the words into something steady. You think exposure changes power. Another slight shift from the human constructs. This time, more than one. No, the voice said. We think it defines it. The next alert hit harder than the rest. Warlord, internal networks are being compromised. Kareth turned sharply. By what? The answer came slower. By our own systems. The displays flickered as command pathways began rerouting, not violently, not destructively, but with precise, surgical control. Communication nodes began isolating themselves. Tactical grids started recalibrating based on updated data that Kareth had not authorized. They're not hacking us, the officer said, confusion rising. They're predicting us. Kareth felt the final piece fall into place. They've already seen everything we can do, he said. And that meant, there's nothing left to surprise them. The human voice returned, Quiet but absolute. We don't need to outfight you. The beat. We just need to outpace you. Across the fleet, systems continued shifting, not failing, not collapsing, but adapting in ways that no longer fully belonged to Karetha's command. The human constructs remained still, waiting, watching, as the structure of his control began to erode. Warlord, the tactical officer said, voice tight with something dangerously close to panic. If we engage now, we cannot guarantee command cohesion. Kareth did not answer immediately, because for the first time, the question was not whether he could win. It was whether he could still control the battlefield. The human voice spoke one final time. You came here to destroy a colony. The pause. But you didn't realize it was already destroying you. Kareth looked out at the silent fleet surrounding him, and understood. The attack had already begun. Kareth made his decision. Full fleet engagement, he said. The words cut through the collapsing command structure like a blade. For a brief moment, everything snapped back into alignment. Orders propagated. Weapons primed. Targeting systems forced coherence where fragmentation had begun to spread. If control was slipping, then he would seize it by force. Fire. The first salvo should have lit the void. Instead, it vanished. Not deflected. Not absorbed. Not intercepted. The energy simply ceased to exist the moment it touched the nearest human construct, dissolving into nothing as if the laws that governed it had been quietly rewritten. A second wave followed. Kinetic projectiles accelerated to relativistic speeds, guided with perfect precision, and stopped. Mid-flight, frozen in space, suspended like fragments trapped inside glass. Across the fleet, weapons continued firing, but the result was the same. Every attack failed, not through defense, but through irrelevance. It was as if the humans were not blocking the assault. They were refusing to participate in it. Adjust targeting parameters. Kareth snapped. Shift frequencies, alternate vectors. Find something that interacts. The response came back fractured. We are cycling through all known configurations. Nothing is registering as effective. Then create new ones. Even as he spoke, Kareth knew the truth. They were reacting, and the humans were not. The human constructs did not move. They did not retaliate. They did not escalate. They simply remained, present, absolute, untouchable. The imbalance was no longer tactical. It was existential. Warlord, the systems officer said, voice trembling despite every effort to control it. Command pathways are degrading further. Predictive interference is increasing. Our own targeting solutions are being overwritten before execution. Kareth felt the pressure closing in, not from the enemy, but from within his own systems. They are inside our decision loops, he realized. Yes, the officer replied. They are deciding before we do. That was the breaking point, because war required sequence. Action. Reaction. Adaptation. But if one side moved before the other even chose, then the war was already decided. The human voice returned. Not loud. Not forceful. But impossible to ignore. You're still trying to fight us like we're the same kind of species. Kareth did not respond. He could not. Because every instinct he had was failing. You measure power through destruction. Through dominance. Through fear. The pause. We measure it through inevitability. The word settled heavily across the bridge. Inevitability. Kareth looked out at the constructs again, and for the first time, he saw them not as ships, but as conclusions. You think this ends here? He forced out. You think isolating us, disrupting our systems, proving your superiority, is enough? The response came immediately. No. The simplicity of it cut deeper than any insult. This is just the part where you realize it's already over. A new alert screamed across the bridge. Warlord, multiple core systems are going offline. Kareth turned sharply. Which systems? The answer came back in a cascade. Communication relays, internal command networks, long-range coordination. Another officer cut in. Our outer fleets are reporting signal loss. They can't receive orders. They're cutting us off from ourselves, someone said. No, Kareth corrected, voice low. They're letting us collapse. Because now it was clear. The humans were not dismantling his empire through direct force. They were removing its ability to function. Step by step. Layer by layer. Until nothing held together. Warlord, the intelligence officer said, voice hollow, external reports confirm uprisings. Kareth froze. Clarify. Multiple subjugated species, across controlled systems. They've seen the Haven 9 broadcast. They've seen our methods. They're rebelling. The implications struck instantly. Supply chains disrupted. Local garrisons overwhelmed. Control nodes destabilized. The empire was fracturing, not from invasion, but from exposure. They turned the galaxy against us, the officer whispered. Kareth shook his head once. No, because that implied manipulation. They showed the galaxy what we are. And the galaxy had chosen. The human voice returned, quieter now. Almost final. You built an empire on control. The pause. We built a system that doesn't need it. Karetha's claws dug into the console one last time. This is not over, he said, forcing the words into something solid. We still have our core weapon systems. We still have. The alert cut him off. Chirp. Immediate. Absolute. Warlord, the star core array. Karetha's breath stilled. What about it? The officer hesitated. It's activating. Silence fell. Because that system required direct authorization. From him. And he had given none. Shut it down, Kareth said. We can't. Override it. We don't have control. Kareth turned slowly toward the main display. Deep within the fleet's central formation, the star core weapon, a system capable of collapsing entire planetary bodies, began to power up, its energy signature rising beyond safe thresholds. Targeting coordinates appeared. But stable. Karetha's eyes narrowed. Where is it aimed? No one answered immediately. Because the answer was already visible. Not Earth. Not a human colony. Not an enemy fleet. The targeting reticle pulsed steadily. At the heart of Karetha's own empire. At his capital system. The human voice spoke one final time. So, unavoidable. We didn't come to destroy you. The pause. Long enough for understanding to settle. We came to let you do it yourself. The star core array surged toward full activation. And Kareth realized. He no longer had the power to stop it. The star core array reached critical threshold in silence. No alarm screamed now. No frantic voices filled the bridge. The chaos that had once defined Karetha's command center had collapsed into something far more unsettling, stillness. A quiet, suffocating stillness where every officer understood exactly what was happening, and that nothing they did would change it. Kareth stood unmoving, his gaze locked on the targeting display. His own capital system. Billions of lives. The center of power he had spent centuries building. The symbol of control that had defined his species' dominance across the stars. Now reduced to a point of impact. Abort sequence, he said, his voice steady despite everything. No response. Override command authority. Warlord priority. Nothing. Because the system was no longer listening. For the first time in his life, Kareth was not in control of his own weapon. They didn't hack it, he said slowly, the realization forming with brutal clarity. They taught it. The human voice answered, not with triumph, not with cruelty, but with something far colder. Your systems follow patterns. You built them to anticipate threats, to adapt, to optimize outcomes. The pause. We gave them better data. Karetha's claws tightened, but there was no anger left in the motion. Only understanding. You turned our own logic against us, he said. Yes. No hesitation. No denial. Because your logic was always the weakness. The star core array surged again, its energy now stabilizing at a level that could not be reversed. Around it, Karetha's fleet remained trapped in a silent perimeter of human constructs, untouched, unchallenged, irrelevant. They had not fired a single shot. And yet, the war was ending. Why? Kareth asked, not as a challenge, but as a final attempt to understand the species that had undone him without striking. You had the power to destroy us, he continued. You had the means to erase entire civilizations. Why not use it? The human voice did not answer immediately. When it did, it carried something unfamiliar. Not anger. Not pride. Something closer to restraint. Because destruction is easy, it said. The beat. Living with what you've done is harder. Kareth looked again at the targeting reticle, at the world he could no longer save. You think this is justice, he said. No. The reply came instantly. We think this is consequence. The difference settled heavily between them. Not vengeance. Not retaliation. A reflection. You showed the galaxy what happens when you are threatened, the voice continued. We showed them what happens when we are. Kareth exhaled slowly. For the first time, there was no calculation left in him. No strategy. No path to victory. Only the clarity of a war that had already been decided long before his fleet ever arrived at Havening. You planned this from the beginning, he said. Yes. You allowed the colony to fall. The pause. Longer this time. But we made sure it mattered. The Starcore array crossed the final threshold. Across the void, distant sensors captured the first ripple, space bending inward around Karetha's capital star, its structure destabilizing under forces no civilization could withstand. Light distorted. Gravity twisted. The system began to collapse in on itself, not with explosion, but with inevitability. Billions of lives. Erased not by an enemy, but by the system they had trusted. Kareth did not look away. He watched. Because this was what his empire had done to others. Reflected. Returned. You've changed the galaxy, he said quietly. The human voice responded one last time. Yes. No hesitation. No pride. Only certainty. We had to. The capital system folded inward, its star collapsing into a singularity that consumed everything bound to it. The shockwave did not travel outward like a weapon. It settled into space like a scar, permanent, undeniable. Across the fleet, silence deepened. No cheers. No celebration. Because the humans had not come for victory. They had come for memory. Transmission complete, one of Karetha's officers whispered, though his voice no longer held meaning. The Haven 9 archive, now expanded with everything that had followed, continued to spread across the galaxy, unchallenged, uncontainable. Every species would see it. Every civilization would understand. Not just what had been done, but what it had created. Kareth lowered his gaze for the first time. What happens now? He asked. The answer did not come from the voice. It came from the absence of it. The human constructs began to fade, not retreating, not fleeing, but dissolving back into the same impossible distortion from which they had emerged. One by one, they slipped beyond perception, leaving Karetha's fleet alone in a system that no longer held power, no longer held control, only consequence. And far beyond, across the stars, human signals began to return. Not as fleets, not as threats, but as presence. Measured, watching, expanding, not hidden anymore, not underestimated. The galaxy had learned something that could not be unlearned. Humans did not need to be the strongest. They only needed to be the last to decide. And when they did, it was already too late.